The moment the billionaire CEO pointed at the crying baby and claimed, with absolute certainty, that the child was his, the entire hospital room fell into a suffocating silence, but no one was prepared for what the single dad would say next. Before we dive into this emotional journey, take a moment. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of truth, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories alive. The storm outside the small city hospital raged like the universe itself was unsettled. Rain slammed against the windows, thunder echoing through the dimly lit corridors. Inside, Ethan Cole stood frozen, his arms trembling as he held the tiny newborn wrapped in a soft blue blanket. His eyes were swollen from sleepless nights and quiet tears, but in that moment, they burned with something stronger than exhaustion, fear, protectiveness, and a love so fierce it almost looked like defiance. Ethan wasn't supposed to be here. Just a few weeks ago, he was a struggling mechanic barely making ends meet, trying to piece his life together after losing his wife, Lily, during a complicated pregnancy. The doctors had told him there was only a small chance the baby would survive. He had prayed every night, sitting beside Lily's hospital bed, whispering promises he didn't even know how to keep. And when she was gone, he thought he had lost everything. But then, somehow, against all odds, their baby boy had made it. He named him Noah. Noah became Ethan's reason to wake up, to breathe, to keep going when the world felt unbearably heavy. He learned how to hold him, feed him, comfort him through the endless nights of crying. He made mistakes, plenty of them, but every time Noah wrapped his tiny fingers around his father's thumb, Ethan felt like maybe, just maybe, he was doing something right. But peace never lasts long for those who have already suffered. 3 days after Noah was born, everything changed. The hospital doors had opened with an urgency that turned heads. Expensive shoes clicked sharply against the floor, followed by a group of men in suits. At the center was a tall, commanding figure, Alexander Grant, one of the most powerful CEOs in the country. His presence alone seemed to suck the air out of the room. People whispered his name like it carried weight, like it meant something more than just a man. Ethan didn't understand why someone like him would be here, until their eyes met. There was something cold and calculating in Alexander's gaze, but beneath it, something else, something desperate. Without hesitation, Alexander stepped forward and pointed directly at the baby in Ethan's arms. His voice, calm but unshakable, cut through the room like a blade as he declared that the child was his son. The words didn't just shock Ethan, they shattered him. At first, it didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. Ethan had been there every step of the way. He had loved Lily, stood by her, held her hand through every appointment, every painful moment. There was no room in his reality for a claim like this, but Alexander didn't back down. He spoke of a past connection with Lily, one Ethan had never known about. He claimed there had been a brief relationship before she met Ethan, something that ended quietly, without closure. According to him, timing made it possible, no, certain, that the child could be his. The room felt smaller with every word. Doubt crept in like a shadow Ethan couldn't escape. He hated himself for even considering it, but the possibility lingered. Lily had never mentioned anything. But then again, how much did he truly know about her life before him? The tension grew unbearable. Doctors exchanged uneasy glances, nurses stood frozen, unsure of what to do. It wasn't just a personal matter anymore, it was a battle between two worlds. One man had power, wealth, influence. The other had nothing but love and a promise he made to a woman who was no longer there to speak for herself. Alexander offered to take responsibility. He spoke of giving the child a future filled with opportunity, security, a life Ethan could never provide. He made it sound reasonable, even generous. To outsiders, it might have seemed like the best outcome, but to Ethan, it felt like someone was trying to rip his heart out of his chest, because this wasn't about money. This wasn't about status, this was his son. And then, just as the weight of the moment reached its breaking point, Ethan did something no one expected. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. Instead, he took a deep breath, held Noah a little closer, and spoke quietly, but with a strength that silenced even the storm outside. He said that maybe, just maybe, biology could be questioned. Maybe the truth wasn't as simple as anyone wanted it to be. But what he knew, what he had lived, was something no test could ever measure. He had been there when Noah took his first breath, when his tiny heart struggled to keep beating. He had stayed through the nights when fear felt suffocating, when grief threatened to consume him. He had chosen to love this child, completely and unconditionally, when the world gave him every reason to give up, and that, he said, made him a father, not blood, not money, not power, love. The room fell silent again, but this time, it wasn't tension, it was something deeper. Something that made people rethink everything they had just witnessed. Alexander stood there, his expression unreadable at first. But slowly, the confidence in his posture began to crack. For the first time, he looked less like a powerful CEO and more like a man confronting something he couldn't control, because Ethan's words weren't just a defense, they were the truth. Days passed, and the situation unfolded in ways no one could have predicted. Tests were conducted. Questions were asked. The truth, when it finally came, was complicated, but it didn't matter as much as everyone thought it would, because something had already changed. Alexander began to see what Ethan had been saying all along. He visited more often, not with lawyers or demands, but with a quiet curiosity. He watched how Ethan cared for Noah, how he spoke to him, how he held him like he was the most precious thing in the world, and slowly, something shifted inside him. The man who once tried to claim the child began to understand that being a father wasn't something you could demand, it was something you earned. In the end, the decision wasn't about winning or losing. It was about what was best for the child, and what was best was love. Ethan didn't lose his son, and Alexander didn't walk away empty either, because sometimes, life doesn't divide people, it changes them. Before the story comes to a close, take a moment and tell us in the comments, what do you think truly makes someone a parent? As the months went by, the storm that once brought chaos became a distant memory. Ethan's life was still far from easy, but it was filled with something stronger than struggle: purpose. And Alexander, the man who once stood as an opponent, became something unexpected, a presence, not as a rival, but as someone who had learned humility through love. Noah grew, surrounded not by conflict, but by understanding, and in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. If this story touched your heart even a little, don't scroll away, like the video, share it with someone who believes in love over everything, and subscribe for more stories that remind us what truly matters, because sometimes, the simplest answer is the one that changes everything forever.